What's going on, everyone? It's Talks with Kenny here, and we are live. What's going on, everyone? So today we're going to be discussing about what's the cause of black failure in America today. Now, as a disclaimer, I want to put this out there that I don't mean to be insensitive. I don't mean to be rude, even if what I say may come across that way for some people. Some people are sensitive when people give an opinion they don't like. And I just want to give a little circumstance of where I'm coming from. I'm the kind of person that doesn't suffer from imagination. I suffer from reality. And I'm a person that's about probability, not possibility. Now, it could be possible a lot of these problems that the black community is dealing with is due to racism, but the probability for me is that it's very low. Okay? My mindset is that I am extreme ownership. Hey, I believe like most things, I have a 50% impact on what happens to me, because end of the day I can't choose what happens to me, but I can choose how I respond. But hey, I'm done with the little TDLDR. So I want to give a quote from Thomas Sowell: is when you want to help people, you tell them the truth. When you want to help yourself, you tell them what they want to hear. And it seems like nowadays in our current political climate, a lot of black people want to hear they want people to tell them what they want to hear. Confirmation bias, right? If you don't know what that is, you can look it up for yourself. But pretty much is that you want people to give an opinion that validates your view of the world. And I think that's what's going on with Black America today, right? So here's another great quote from Thomas Sowell. And you're going to see I reference him a lot, but this is to set up the whole, intention of this video. Because I know some people in the comment section, they'll probably get mad saying that I'm trying to ignore that racism exists. I already said the countless of my videos that racism exists at a personal level. I concede that point. But structural, institution, systematic, no, I don't think that's a problem in America today. Here's another quote from the great Thomas Sowell: the liberal vision of blacks' fate as almost being wholly in the hands of whites is a debilitating message for these blacks who take it seriously. However convenient it may be for those who are receptive to an alibi. And this is the biggest, I think one of the biggest cause of black failure is that black people don't want to address issues and things that they actually have direct control over. Their education, their behavior, right? Skills that they gain and conceive. A lot of the things that black people complain about as racism is just pattern recognition. People recognize a pattern and they make assumptions based on that pattern, because that's how evolutionary biology, that's how humans survive throughout time. If I saw a man get eaten by a tiger, my pattern recognition is going to come in and say, hey, let me not go buy those things because those things can eat me. That's not racism. I'm not being lionist. No, I'm looking at reality. And just because people point and observe something in reality does not make them racist. And I think that's a big problem that black people also face, is that they want to excuse all their lack of achievement on this alibi being always because I'm black, always because of white privilege. This is why I'm not successful in life. And this is the general theme of all identity politics. That's why I did identity politics this Wednesday. Oh, and follow me on Twitter if you haven't already. But yeah, this is where I get the liberal savior complex. Is because they teach learned helplessness for black people. That black people can't do anything for themselves because of the color of their skin. And I reject that notion completely. But, I digress. So I got three stories here, and I kind of just make my point, and then we get into the main event, which is what I'm pretty sure people came here for, is the Dinesh D'Souza breaking down race in America. But let's get into it. You get my thoughts from my perspective first. So, two major real estate engines nix crime data in racial equity push. Now, this was in 2021. Racial equity push. Why would you, what assumptions are this news people are making when they say they are eliminating crime data out of racial equity? What that means? People tend to not to go to predominantly black neighborhoods. Is that racist? Or they notice that predominantly black neighborhoods have higher rates of crime, 5 times more than other ethnically segregated communities, right? In a Hispanic community, high crime rates, black community, high crime rates, but Asian and white communities who are the majority in that community will have lower crime rates. That's not due to racism, that's due to behavior. And that's the theme of the show is going to be behavior, behavior, behavior. Behavior determines your outcomes more than your race, right? I have a quote for you guys. You have power over your own mind, not outside events. Know this and you have strength. And this is the kind of theme that I want to point black community towards, that we can fix our own problems. Let's stop doing black on black crime. Let's make our communities the safest communities. But that's on us. Only we can fix that. And this is why liberals don't like to acknowledge black on black crime, because it kind of destroyed this narrative of, oh, racists are out here trying to lynch us. Even though statistically, as of 2023, white people are the least racist people in America. I digress. Realtor.com has removed crime data from its website, and Redfin has decided not to add it out of concern that it could perpetuate racial inequality. Observing reality is perpetuating racial inequality. This is what I'm talking about pattern recognition. People recognize a pattern and say, hey, black people commit a lot of crime. Black men commit a lot of crimes. I don't want to be in there. Crime rates hurts your property value. Even me, as a fellow black person, it's the same concept with me. What's going on here? It's the same concept with me. I have my kids. I don't want to go into a high crime rate area. Statistically, if you're well off, you don't live with other black people. Say that's the truth. Single motherhood helps facilitate these environments, because people who come from single mother households have a higher propensity to end up in prison. That's a fact. You can't deny it. You can't run away from that. The black community has 72% of its people born out of wedlock, born to single mothers. You don't think that plays a part into why black people have a high crime rate? That's behavior, not your race, because this can happen to any single mother. If the white community has 72% single motherhood, they'll have higher rates of crime as well. It's not a race thing. It's a behavior thing. And until the black community say, hey, let's stop making this decision that's incentivizing this outcome, we're going to keep getting what we're getting. We're going to keep getting our house value lower, because this is what they like to talk about when they talk about racial inequality. Oh, look at our neighborhoods. They're worth less than white America's neighborhoods. Why is that? Well, you have a high crime rate. It ain't because it's a predominantly black area. No. It's because of the high crime rate, and people don't feel safe going in your neighborhood, especially if they're another race. Interracial crime, which is black on white crime, 85% of the time a black person is attacking a white person. Why would a white person want to move into your neighborhood? If you look at economics, black people make less money than other groups of people. Asian people make the most money out of all groups of people in America today. So in a predominantly black area, Asians and white people won't move there because, hey, statistically, they're more likely to experience interracial crime against them. Or how black people categorize it, hate crimes. 85% of the time by a black perpetrator. Oh, it's because you're racist. No, it's because of your behavior. Right? You may not control what happens to you, but you can control how you respond. And white and Asians people are choosing how to respond. Hey, I don't want to move into a predominantly black neighborhood. And even successful black people don't want to move into a predominantly black neighborhood. Why? Because if you're rich, you got something going for yourself. You move into your house. You make. Ice Cube experienced this firsthand. Ice Cube tried to stay in the hood after he made his millions. Guess what happened to him? Guess how the black community treated him? They robbed him. They broke into his house. They stole his stuff. His house was constantly in danger. They forced him to move out of there because he realized it's easier for people to steal from you than to go out and do their own thing. And that's the truth. And that's the reality of the black community. That they just want an alibi for their failures. Right? So let's continue with the story. Obviously, I think I made my point with the crime rates. Now let's get into the NACP report card. So if you guys know what this is the National Achievement report card, the nation's report card, and it goes into the proficiency rates based on ethnicity. So this is from the 12th grade, 2019. And as you can see, let's do Asians. Look at Asians. This is the majority. The majority of Asians are either proficient academically or advanced. Craziness. All right. Now, let's look at the black people. Look. You look at the difference between Asians. Only 20% of Asians are below the basic average in the national report card. And if you look at blacks, 66% in 2019. And only 7% of blacks are proficient. And there's so little blacks that are advanced, has advanced academic achievement that doesn't even show up statistically. This is a problem. And this is for mathematics, which is one of the black people's weakest subjects. right? And then this is kind of what drives why there's such a low amount of black people in STEM, engineering, right? I saw something somewhere that there's not a single, for certain science-based majors, there's not a single PhD held by a black person. In physics, I believe, I forgot the exact title, but when all these companies are, oh, we're going to put black people in tech, we need black and Hispanic people in tech. From what pool? You're going to be pulling Hispanic and black people from other majors to fill it up? And this is why affirmative action is failing in these tech companies. Why, when they get massive layoffs, they lay off a lot of women, a lot of Hispanics, a lot of black people, if they had anything in the first place. Because the pool of candidates is so small that it's impossible to fill their ranks based on racial quota. And this is a problem. Like, this is a problem. You can see, like, no matter how much you try to give the water to black people, you can't make them drink. Black people are suffering over a skill gap. I can admit that, yes. Black people don't have the skills to take advantage of a lot of these opportunities. I admit that. But it's not because of racism. It's because of personal behaviors in the home. Like, I'm gonna be real with you. Personally, my mom, immigrant, when I was born here, whatever, she taught me how to read at 6 years old. Now, if you went out and surveyed black people, say, hey, did your son know how to read at age 6? I bet you many of them will say no. Remember, this community, black community, is raised by 72% single motherhood. As a single mother, my mom wasn't single at the time she was teaching me how to read. She was still with my father, right? Single moms, when my mom became a single mom, after she separated from my father, she didn't do that for my little brother, right? And I think this is why I have such a love for reading, because I was exposed to it at an early age. A lot of single parents don't have time to invest in their kids, to teach them about financial literacy, how to read. Hell, read bedtime stories. Single parents don't have time for that. They don't have time to instill those advantages into their kids. But guess what? Asian parents do this. Kumon, I don't have it with me right here. But Kumon is a curriculum that Japanese people use a lot to educate their kids, starting from the age of 2. And is it no surprise that these Asian people are outperforming a lot of the other groups of people in academics? Majority of Asians in school are either proficient at a grade level or advanced. This is why. At 2 years old, they're teaching their kids already. Oh, here you go. I'm doing that to my son right now. My son already know how to write, trace, cut, learning numbers at 2. Because that's why I decided to expose him. And all I'm saying is that black people, hey, let's change our behavior. Let's change how we approach academia. Let's not sit back and wait for people to change the standards, lower the standards for us so we can remain comfortable at doing the same thing that's not working, which hurts us in the long run. And I'll show you a case why. Right. And here's this information I want to point back to before I move on to the next subject, next story. I still got 7 minutes before I go into the Dinesh D'Souza video. Right here for the NACP report card for reading, 50% of black 12th graders were below basic in 12th grade reading in 2019. 16% were proficient readers, and only 1% of black people in 2019, black students, black 12th graders in high school, were proficient as advanced readers. Sad. You want to see the Asians? Asians for reading. Asian 12th graders were below basic. Only 20% of Asians was below reading standards in 2019 for 12th grade reading. 37% of them were proficient and 15% were advanced for reading. Oh, sorry, my bad. I read the wrong stat. For reading, yeah, it's the same stat. 14% of Asians were advanced readers. Reading, having literacy is a big advantage that black people don't, as a culture, focus enough to incentivize their children to go into. When I was growing up black in high school, people made fun of me for being smart, for knowing how to do my math off the top of my head, how to read, how to speak well in public speaking. It was a big skill I have. Black culture, black people used to make fun of me. And if I wasn't the kind of person I was, I mentioned before in earlier videos that I'm a nonconformist. It's not easy for people to make me, like, peer pressure me into being something that I'm not. I'll say, hey, look, this is how my parents raised me. I have to do right by them. I don't care what y'all think of me. I don't want to be dumb. But this is the kind of incentive that the black culture has pushed young black impressionable people down the road. Oh, don't be financially literate. Don't know how to read. Don't know how to write. Don't know how to speak English. Oh, let's speak ghetto. Let's speak slang. Slang only limits your possibility of networking. Because if I talk proper English, I can socialize and network with any American. But if I was talking, what you do, shawty? What's going on, boy? If I was talking like that, Asians won't be able to understand me. White people won't be able to understand me. Hispanic people may not be able to understand me. I limit my economic opportunities, and it shows. People who knows how to speak English perform better in economics than people who only speak Spanish, who speak the non-native tongue. Duh. High income jobs are primarily in English. If you want to work for some Fortune 500 company, they're not going to only speak a solely Spanish speaker. It's impossible. When you're in Rome, you do as the Romans do. It's also a problem of assimilation, right? Even in Hispanics. Look, Hispanics are doing a little bit better than the blacks by 4%. See, less of them are falling behind, right? And it's just willingness, right? It's just willingness. Don't they call Jonathan Field says, don't they call it Ebonics? Yes, that's what it's called. I forgot. Which is just slang. People say it's actually a language and it's not, and it's just dumb down English. What do you think? It is dumb down English. I did a video on this before. I forgot which video it was, honestly, Jonathan Field. But yeah. And it limits your like someone who's focused their time saying Ebonics, right? Learning Ebonics and saying this is an actual language. Bruh, you're setting these people up for failure. You're setting up these people where they can't get a job. They won't be able to actually perform well academically. And you wonder why black people are falling behind in reading. Only 1% of black readers are advanced for reading. Only 14% of black students in the 12th grade are actually proficient at reading. That means when most black students go into college, they'll have to take remedial reading because of Ebonics, because of slang, because they want to stay comfortable. And this is my biggest problem. I think the biggest cause of black failure is the expectations that society has on black people. I feel like people have a lower bar, a lower standard on black people than they have for everyone else. Everyone else have to rise to the standard. Black people, oh no, it's okay. It's okay. You only got one right answer out of 10. That's good enough for you. The bigotry of low expectations. I think that's a big part. The CRT style of learned helplessness. When I raise my kids are not going to be helpless. I'm not going to take any excuses from them. Sorry. Oh, some white kid said call you the N-word. Why? Why call you the N-word? What you did to him? How you respond? Because you only can do two things. You're either going to prove him right or you're going to prove him wrong. Are you going to prove that you're a dumb N-word? Or are you going to show, you just saying that because you know I'm better than you. And you think you're going to get a rise out of me by calling me the N-word. And that's where all this really comes from. Yeah, and yes, Jonathan Fields, I am doing well. So let's go on to the next story of how the bigotry of low expectation, how it hurts people in the long run. So this is a story from, I remember it happened a year ago, February 2021. That was a San Francisco school board eliminated academic admission standards for renowned schools. So now there's this popular thing that the left likes to do. Remember, the left think they're supposed to come in here and save black folks from the bigotry of high expectations, right? And they decided to remove the admissions of a nationally acclaimed high school in hopes of increasing racial diversity. This is why people who push for diversity, and this is why I did my video on inconvenient truths about identity politics. When you push for diversity, you're chasing two different goals. Diversity is not your strength. Diversity only cares about one thing. Either you have a bunch of people that look diverse, or it actually is increase the quality of the product that you have. Right? So they decided to do this. Longwell High School, a long lightning rod for issues of race and education, has been the San Francisco School District only 9-12 campus to base admissions for a formula of grades and standardized testing for most students. And here's another thing a lot of people don't tell you about standardized testing, and I'm almost going to wrap up here soon. The point of standardized testing was to eliminate special treatment, right? You couldn't just get into a high-ranking school because you happen to know the dean of students. No. Or you happen to be from a rich family, or you happen to have legacy-based admissions. It was to give people who had no connections, right? No pedigree, no institution behind them, just on the merit of their skill, they were able to make it into college, into these institutions. It was supposed to equalize opportunity. Hey, may the best people win, regardless if you came from a poor household, a rich household, middle class household, Hispanic, black. It don't matter. If you got the scores, you should be allowed in. It was supposed to eliminate class-based standards. That was the point of standardized testing. Now these people, these DEI, racial equitist people, want to say now that standardized testing are racist because black people and Hispanic people don't perform as well. And this school is mostly Asian, if I remember correctly. Right? This is what they worry about. Out of the 2,000 students, 18% were white, 11% Hispanic, 1.8% were black, and 50% was Asian, largely Chinese. Oh my God, this is not proportional. My representation. Does it matter? Like, honestly, if the way the school had it with their standardized testing and all this stuff, they had one of the best schools in San Francisco's district. And what did liberal, democratic California decide to do? Oh, let's change it because of segregation and exclusion. The process has created a school that does not reflect the diversity of UFCSD students and perpetuates segregation and exclusion. Failure for a lack of achievement. This is what it is. Instead of recognizing the reality, hey, we can't fix this. We have to help black people fix this for themselves. Government, get out of the way. This is the government getting out of the way. So what did the California Education Code decide to do? That high demand school must enroll students through a random, unbiased process according to resolutions. Like standardized tests is not unbiased. Because liberals didn't get an outcome they perceive to be right, they want to change the system. And you look, if you have half a brain, you already know what happens. So here's the result. A year after. So remember, February 2021, they decided that, hey, we're going to do a random lottery system, unbiased, right? We're just going to put random people and make it proportional. 30% black, 12% Asian, 12% Hispanic, 50% white, right? And that's how we divvy up the lotteries, the lotteries, right? New data shows shift at Lawwell High School, more students giving failing grades after admission change. This is the result. I have a saying I like to repeat. If you test a theory in reality and reality shows you your theory is wrong, you must accept that your theory is wrong. Diversity doesn't improve performance. Diversity only tries to virtue signal and show, look how good we are. Look, we have a diverse school. But is it actually helping the people you're putting in that environment? This is why I'm saying affirmative action, it sets minorities up for failure because you put minorities in a position where they can't really compete. If I put a 6-foot point guard and I say, hey, we need more diversity at the center position for basketball, we're going to put you at center. And he's going against these 6'9", 250 power forward centers. I'm setting him up for not to perform well in that environment because his skill set could not meet the demand that I place on him. And this is what you're doing to a lot of minority students when you use affirmative action or you just place them based on racial quota. You lower the standards. And what? And in effect, you lower the quality of the education. But racism. Okay. I'm going to look into some chats before I go into the main event, which is Dinesh D'Souza's video. Jonathan Field says, a derogatory term is described black people with double standards at its finest. Yes. It's how you use it. Really shouldn't be used, in my opinion. Yeah, it shouldn't. So we're going into the main event. So Dinesh D'Souza had a video I found, which I found interesting. In January 1996, Dinesh D'Souza had a book called End of Racism. And here Dinesh is going to make the arguments for why racism is not the cause of black failure. I gave you my thoughts for 20 minutes about different cases, the academic skill gap between the black community, the black race and other groups of people in America. The cause of those things is due to parenting, how black kids are raised today, and some of the unique circumstances that face black community, which is single motherhood, single parents don't having the time to really invest in their kids and really teach their kids at the same level as other groups of people, right? The lack of families, and this is what I'm saying, the lack of families is what's really hurting the black community and is what's really causing black failures. Is their lack of achievement. It's not racism. It's due to personal decision making. And until black community own up to the fact that they're doing things wrong, their culture is incentivizing them to pick up wrong values and make bad decisions, which gives them bad outcomes. This is going to continue to happen. And even when the Democrats, these liberals come out here, lower the standards, or in most cases remove the standard, it still negatively hurt the black community. But I've been rambling for 25 minutes. Let's get into the video.
Dinesh D'Souza, you have written the end of racism. We'll get into in much detail what you have to say here. But I mean, you start from really almost turning a lot of the liberal analysis of racism on its ear by claiming that racist society, as we've known it historically, and a lot of the defenses the black community has put up against a racist society are out of date, outmoded, that they're no longer needed. Give me a little bit more insight into that background.
Look, there are three possible reasons why groups can differ. The first is genes or genetic differences. The second is culture. And the third is discrimination and its institutional legacy.
Right.
So, Jonathan Fields, I'll make a book recommendation at the end of the stream if you want, or actually I'll probably make a separate video on that. So on the first point, he made 3 points there. He said either genetics, culture, or discrimination. Now, the two more likely circumstances in my view is discrimination and culture. Discrimination, in my view, has a cost. One of the books Jonathan Fields I'm gonna recommend for you is what's it called? It's Thomas Sowell's Discrimination and Disparities. And Thomas Sowell articulates such a great argument about how there's a cost to discrimination. That any day, if you want to act on your bias, there's a cost to your bias. It's a two-way street. Cause and effect, people. Right? If I'm here's an example I like to give. If I was a racist basketball coach, right, and I was in charge of the NBA draft, and I had to draft an NBA player for my basketball team, and I said, no, I only want to get the best white player in the NBA as my pick. And I had available, let's say I had the first round draft pick. LeBron James was available for me at the number 1 pick. There's a cost to that. If I don't pick LeBron James, I'm setting myself up for failure next season because this guy's going to come out here and destroy my team because I decided to act on my racial bias. This is the cost of discrimination. It may not be obvious, right? All you would see is, oh, that coach is being racist. Everyone knows clearly that LeBron James is the best player in the NBA draft. But he might lose his job 5 years after because then the coach will be like, yo, we had a chance to draft LeBron James. Why you didn't draft LeBron James? And I'm here stuttering, trying to make an excuse for why I drafted some white player in the draft instead of LeBron James. And LeBron James won a chip on my team. Obviously, head and shoulders over the guy I pick. People are going to see it. The results is going to be obvious. Hey, that guy's clearly the better player. Why you had a chance to draft him? Why you didn't draft him? There's a cost to discrimination. So yes, discrimination is bad. I understand that, but there's a cost to it. There's a penalty both sides play. If you're that good, right? Let's say if I'm that good as a YouTuber and someone discount me because I'm black. Oh, you're a black person. You don't know what you're talking about, Kenny. You have no knowledge on this topic, right? And then I end up debating the guy. They say, oh, he has all this knowledge. He's so smart, whatever. And I destroy him. People are going to be like, yo, clearly Kenny was the better debater. Why you didn't pick him? Oh, right? People can be wrong. It's arbitrary standard. But I digress. This interview happened in 1996. Culture is the more significant impact in my view. Because if I grow up in a culture where, hey, my failures have alibis. If I fail at life, I can always blame the fact that I'm black. Oh, I only got 2,000 subscribers because I'm black. No one like a black man talking about these things. Oh, it's my race. It's my race. I always have an excuse. I always have an alibi for why I fail at life. I'm not incentivized to improve or get better. But if I grew up in a culture where, hey, Kenny, there's no excuses. Discipline equals freedom. Extreme ownership. You have 50% impact on every interaction that you have. You may not control how the video performs, but you control how the video is set up, how it's structured, what you're talking about, what clips you put in it. You have a lot more impact to influence the outcome in your favor. Based on those two cultures I just point out, what version of Kenny will perform better in life? The latter. The one where, hey, you determine your outcomes. You have 50% control over every situation, and you have the ability to influence outcomes. That version of me will perform way better than the version of me where I have an excuse and alibis for my shortcomings and failures. Oh, it's because I'm black. That's why I can't read at a efficient rate. Oh, I failed the test because I was a black person. Oh, my video didn't do well because I was black, right? I have no incentive to actually improve on my craft because I'm always looking for some external factor to blame for the shortcomings of my of my failures. And I think this is the kind of negative spiral that the black community has fallen into, that black culture has adopted. This idea that their fate is in the hands of people that don't look like them. Instead of saying, hey, like, who chose you to become a single mom? Who told you to sleep with that guy? Who told you to date that guy? Why didn't you do this? Why you didn't do that? Oh, nothing's my fault. I'm perfect. Everything is someone else's fault. And that's the problem. But I digress. Let's get back into it.
Right. I reject both the liberal view, which holds that black failure is largely or mainly due to discrimination, and I reject the view that it's genetic. So I focus on cultural differences. And I point out, for example, that in virtually every measure of academic achievement.
Jonathan Fields, I agree. I think in our culture today, we have a fragile generation. There's a book called Anti-Fragile. See, you're getting me into recommending books again. But in our culture, we have this idea that we need to coddle Gen Z, right? And I think this is mainly because of the liberal, in public schools and education, it's dominated by women. So women tend to be more catering, more enabling of these kind of behaviors that, oh, people, to feel sorry for yourself. Oh, it's okay, right, that you failed. You could try it better next time. There's no standard or expectations to succeed in life. It's just like whatever makes you feel comfortable, right? And the lack of accountability comes from people wanting to be comfortable. What's more comfortable? Saying nothing's your fault or everything's your fault? If I had to force you on one of the extremes, what's more comfortable to take? The nothing's your fault. That's easier to say. Oh, it's not my fault that I failed this test. The teachers didn't give us enough time to study for the test. Well, you had 8 hours to study for this test, but instead of using the 8 hours to study for this test, you decided to be on TikTok, right? Discipline is recognizing, hey, what you have control over and what you don't have control over. You didn't have control that the teacher gave you in short notice. Hey, by the way, guys, tomorrow you got a test on this. Oh, shoot. You got out of school at 3 p.m. Between 3 to 8, between those time, what did you decide to do? You're responsible for that. If between 3 to 8 you decided, hey, I'm gonna study for the test, you'll have a good outcome. But between 3 to 8, the easiest thing to do, oh, let's play TikTok. I'm gonna go on TikTok. I'm gonna play video games, whatever. And then the test come up tomorrow. Oh, I failed the test. The teacher's, it's unfair. The teacher gave us last minute. Who gives a quiz the next day? You squandered that time. That's your responsibility. That's your fault. But people ain't gonna look. People are not reflective like that. They rather look outward and blame something outward because it's human nature. It's just It's the easiest thing to do. And this is why I think our culture, we have done ourselves a bad disservice by not having us strive for higher principles, higher virtue. Because virtue tells you, hey, you aspire for a higher standard, a higher power, whatever, whether that be God for you, principles, beliefs, nationality, whatever. Hey, I have to strive for better. Hey, like I can't control the fact. Hey, I can't control the fact that she made the test tomorrow, but I can control my preparation for the test as best as I can. And when I get a good outcome, people are going to say, oh, you're smart, you're lucky, you're this. No, I just decided to make a sacrifice. I sacrificed my 5 hours of time that I had after I got out of school to study for the test instead of having fun with my test. And this is a big point that I have is pretty much surrounded by delayed gratification. People who can delay their gratification tend to be more successful than people who cannot, right? Praise them. Same thing with men. If a man is alcoholic, drug, then they should be shamed that people, instead of praising and saying that he's doing okay and accepting it. I'm just saying people tolerate a lot more than we should in our culture, right? In our culture, we don't push people to strive for excellence because people think it's hustle culture. Hustle culture is toxic. We should have 32-hour work days. When, hey, no, that's what's necessary. Like 40 hours, the more time you put into something, the better you are at it. Right. And I think in our culture, what I mean by they enabling it or they accept it is that they don't push people to excel anymore, because people think Gen Z, millennials, we're fragile. We can't handle expectation. Oh, I crumbled under the expectations, right? That we get coddled. And I believe shame is a good way of trying to bring that accountability back, because human nature is, and this is a point I think I'm speaking more as a father, is that I'm very stern by my nature. So I'm very demanding. I can be very demanding sometimes. At least that's what my wife tells me. But I have expectations for people. And people in our culture today, people are saying that having expectation on your kids is somewhat toxic, or they shame that. They shame having some type of expectation. They shame for having some type of idea of how your kid is supposed to be. Right. And I think this is the major mistakes we have in our culture. And I think shame is a way of incentivizing good behavior, because our human psychology, we respond more to negativity than we do to positivity. And shame was a way of pushing people towards a path that would be more beneficial for themselves and the community and the society as a whole. Right. And I think the fact that we remove shame, it allowed people to feel comfortable just being whatever. Being poor, being failure to launch. A lot of men are having failure to launch issues, right? Making excuses for why they still live with their parents at 27 years old. Oh, it's because of college debt. Oh, it's because of this. We became accepting of people's excuses. And that just allowed them to have it as an alibi. So whenever something happened, oh, I'm depressed. That's why I'm not being successful in my life, right? And I think that's kind of the failures that the Black community is falling into. And I think America as a whole is falling into, is that we're looking for alibis to excuse our shortcomings in our society for why we're not striving for excellence. Because if we don't happen to meet the standard, then we find a way of coping with that, it seems like. Right. And it was a long-winded answer, but let's get back into the video.
In our economic performance, we find not just whites, but immigrants, Cubans, West Indians, Koreans, leapfrogging ahead of American blacks and claiming the fruits of the American dream. I think that this is because blacks have developed a culture that represents an adaptation to historical circumstances, but one that is today in some respects a liability or dysfunctional.
Well, it's interesting because not only have you kind of turned a lot of the liberal arguments that the impediments to black society are externally set up by the white community, but you go further and say that this should be kind of an uplifting analysis for the black community, because it says genetically you're not stuck, and that you shouldn't be so fatalistic to believe that the only way your lot in life is going to improve is when white society improves their attitude. Yet, is it being received as an uplifting message by the black community?
It should be, but this is the problem with identity policies as well. Feminism says the same thing about men. Oh, men are the reason why women have the glass ceiling, right? You make the enemy of the other instead of looking at women. Hey, women, statistically, you take more vacations than men. Statistically, men work more hours than women, regardless if it's hourly or salary, right? Statistically, men negotiate their salaries more than women do, right? But instead of telling the women to change their behavior to get the outcome they want the circumstances to change to more fit what they find comfortable and easy to do, right? And I think this is the point that's been going on with our culture as well, is that we want to cater to the youth and, oh, you don't have to change. We'll change society so you can change. When it's been the primary stance of human nature that humans must adapt to their environment, not the environment to adapt to human nature. And that's the reality. That's how God made the world. We adapt, not the world. Climate change, oh, it's supposed to be. No, the climate is going to be the climate, no matter what you do, no matter what you think. The world is, and you have to accept it. You have to change. But people don't want to hear that. This is why I think socialism is becoming as popular as capitalism, because people don't like the environment that capitalism has. Okay, I want socialism. But then they don't realize socialism is even worse than capitalism. I mean, I digress.
Well, Thomas Sowell, the black writer, says of this book that The End of Racism is a heartbreaking book because the truth is heartbreaking.
Yeah, it is.
It is a tough book, as I say, and yet it's a hopeful book, because if our problems are in our genes, we can't do anything about them. And if the problems of blacks are due to white racism, I don't know of any way Even if we could magically get rid of white racism overnight, this would do nothing to increase black test scores, improve black savings rates or black rates of business formation.
Hey, what, like 1996? Look at us now, 27 years later. Has this improved? All this focus on racism, discrimination, affirmative action. Has it helped black people? No, black people still have lower test scores. Why? Because the black people didn't change. The black people didn't change their behavior. They didn't change how they approach academics. So they're going to keep getting the same result. You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. You can make it easier for the horse to get to the water, but if the horse does not decide to take the steps to actually achieve the outcome, drinking the water, they're still gonna get the same. Change is outside of your comfort zone. That goes for as an individual and that goes for as a community. For 50 years, the black community has been hearing a message that it's someone else's fault. It's white privilege's fault. It's racism's fault. This is phantom. This is a boogeyman. The truth of the matter is that the black community is doing actions and behaviors that's creating outcomes that negatively affect the community as a whole. And instead of accepting the fact that, hey, we need to change our value systems in our culture to push our youth into doing more highly productive things that will help us academically and then economically. No, black community don't want to do that because that would admit that they were chasing the wrong problem. So they doubled down and said, no, Kenny, you're excusing white supremacy. Instead of looking at my argument and actually saying, does Kenny have a point here? Is it more probable that we are the cause of our own undoing? Or is it actually some elaborate system that's out to make us fail in life? Because if it was a system, then all black people would fail. But that's not the case. Black people still make it. Black people are still academically successful. Now you get the people who are capable of making it to Harvard on their own merit. Now you got them questioning themselves, damn, did I really get here? Or was it because of affirmative action? And this is the biggest problem I have with identity politics and the DEI stuff, is that even as someone who's already capable of achieving these standards without any help from affirmative action, people will credit your success with affirmative action. Oh, it's affirmative action's the reason why you made it into life, Kenny. The reason you made it into being a YouTuber or in your corporate position is because of affirmative action. My friend tried to do that to me. I was like, so you don't think I would have made it without affirmative action? No, because he has this idea that black people won't get any opportunities without affirmative action. This is why I say affirmative action needs to die, needs to go. Someone needs to abolish it. Because it allows these people to continue slandering people, black people who would have made it on their own merits with this nonsense. So, hey, I digress. I appreciate the super chat, Jonathan Fields. I hope you come back as always, but hey, if not, I'll see you on the next one. Thank you so much for the super chat.
Or strengthen black families or reduce black on black crime. Those are the most serious problems facing blacks. Now, for a generation, people have said you cannot point to these problems because to do so is blaming the victim.
Right.
When Daniel Patrick Moynihan wrote his report on the black family in the 60s, the illegitimacy rate for blacks was 25%. He said it was a national tragedy, and people said, you're a racist, stop talking about it. And he did. He hasn't said a word about it since. The illegitimacy rate for blacks in the United States today is close to 70%. So when these problems are ignored, they metastasize, they become far worse. On the other hand, if they are recognized and acknowledged, I'm confident that they can be addressed.
What caused that pathology or that culture that you document and
Incentives caused the culture from the black community going from 25% single motherhood to 72% single motherhood, right? And one of the problems I think I have as a conservative is that when I bring out that, hey, black on black crime is a problem, black men committing disproportional more crimes than other groups of people is what's causing them to be incarcerated at a higher rate. We need to fix that. The black community needs to fix that. It's not no one else's fault. We need to fix it. People want to act like, oh, no, the problem's not there, Kenny. You're making that up. It's actually the system's fault. The system's fault for this. Appreciate the super chat. Chance Green is dead. The $4 super chat. You just gave me a sticker. I appreciate it so much. But that's how people play it. People say, I don't want to point out the problem. The problem is someone else's fault, not mine. Behavior causes outcomes, not your skin color, not discrimination. Discrimination is only an obstacle. But how you respond to that obstacle is whether you get success or you get failure. Because at the end of the day, it's on you. If you have no responsibility for your outcome, then you have no authority over your outcome. And last time I checked, God gave us free will. Whatever you believe, nature, God, logos, the truth and the reality is everyone has free will. And what you do with that free will determines your outcome, right? Like I said, you can't control what happens to you, but you can control how you respond. And how you respond, does it make your situation better or does it make it worse? How I like to respond is, hey, how can I not make this bad outcome worse? And you do that step by step, and eventually you're in a better position than how you started off. And I think that's a message that I think that's a more empowering message for black people than to tell them that their fate's at the hands of white people and it's up to white people to change their ways and change their privilege or remove standardized testing so that way black people can have achievement in this life. I think that's a very condescending message. And I think that black community has been brainwashed by the liberals to accept that as a positive one, which is, I disagree with that. I think that's a very condescending message. But hey, I'm different. I think differently than most people. But I digress. Let's continue with the video.
Itemize as what you see as the source problem.
Well, first of all, it's not solely caused by poverty. One of the contributions of the book is it disputes the so-called culture of poverty analysis that goes back to the 60s. I point out, for example, that Asians and whites who come from poor families making less than $20,000 a year score higher on tests of academic achievement.
That's 96.
Than blacks who come from families earning over $60,000
Wow.
a year. I point out that.
So even the money point, when they say, oh, it's because Asian people, you just admitted, Kenny, Asian people are the richest race of people in America. That's probably why the reason why they achieve so well academically is because of economics. Well, no, it's not. It's because of processes, it's because of behaviors, because of decisions, family values, family rearing, culture. That's the reason why the black community is falling behind. It's not because of racism that the black community is falling behind. It's because of a dysfunctional decision making in our communities. It's how we raise our kids. If you raise your kids and you're a single parent and you have to go work to provide for them, who's raising your kids? Your environment's raising your kids. The gangs are raising your street. There's a saying in the hood, the streets raise your kid. If you don't raise your kid, the streets are raising your kid. Who's it easier to raise your kid? Because I'll bet you, even a married couple, a married black family that is in the hood, their kids perform better than kids that have a single parent household because of this. Because there's two parents, there's two opportunities to rear your kid in the family's values. And the family's values will push you to greater heights academically, economically, than the environment surrounding him. This is why I say poverty is not the cause of the black outcomes. Poverty is not the cause of crime in the black community. I believe crime is the cause of poverty. People can debate me that in the comment section, but I digress. Let's continue.
Poor blacks have a much higher illegitimacy rate than poor whites, for example, and so on. I think one of the reasons for this is that blacks have had a unique experience in the United States, differing from that of immigrants. And it's not surprising that as a result of that experience, blacks have developed a culture, a set of attitudes, values, behaviors that are formed out of the crucible of that experience. For example, I point out that while Americans have traditionally been hostile to the federal government, viewing it as the enemy of rights. Mm-hmm. For blacks, the federal government has been a deliverer of rights, a provider of rights. It was the federal government that ended both slavery and segregation and played a crucial role in employing a lot of blacks in this century. It was the main force behind affirmative action, for example. Many blacks owe their middle-class status to the government.
That's what they say. But even in the 1960s, appreciate the super chat, Seco, $2 super chat. This is my first time. I don't know if you mean seeing you. You put simping you. Seeing you. Please be gentle. I'll try to be gentle. I'll try. But what I was going to say with this government intervention, I think the black community has kind of got sedated in a way, got used to being comfortable with government intervention, government doing things for them. And it conditioned the black community kind of to be dependent on the government. The same way the slave got dependent on the slave master. All right. And I always make this claim that Democratic Party plays plantation politics with black community, minority communities, poor communities. The Democrats play this game of, hey, you need to be dependent on us. And for your dependence, we have to benefit from you, aka your vote. Just like slaves, okay, we're gonna take care of you from cradle to grave, but you have to labor on our behalf. And we'll take care of you. But I have authority, I have power, I have say so, I can mistreat you, right? Black community is always complaining about how the Democratic Party, they're in an abusive relationship with the Democratic Party. This is why. Because they were taught and conditioned, especially by liberal schools, to be dependent on a political party to do things for them. And my argument as a conservative is to say, hey, black community, stop focusing so much on political power and start focusing more on your human power. Develop your human power, because only through human power can you actually be independent from a political party. But I digress.
So it's not surprising that blacks have a cultural orientation that looks at government sympathetically. You know, we have recently this million-man march on Washington. Blacks always marching on Washington, looking to the government for answers. Meanwhile, other groups are setting up entrepreneurial associations, rotating credit systems, and within a generation.
I'm sorry, I keep pausing it, but what he said there was important. Other groups of people focus on, hey, how can we better our situations without being dependent on a political party, right? Entrepreneurship, right? Human capital is one way of phrasing this, right? And in the 1920s, somewhere in there's a league, the Negro Business League. Black community was doing this. When black community was majority, like overwhelmingly Republican, they were doing this stuff. They were doing entrepreneurships. They were becoming professionals. They were focused on gaining skills. They didn't worry about political power as much, right? But this is what I'm talking about, this long march. Just like the liberals and the Marxists and the progressives had this long march through the institutions, the Democrat Party had this long march through the the black community, right? Either they lynched them to force them to vote Democrat, right? The Democratic Party conditioned the black community to be dependent on them. Oh, you want protection? That's why the Tulsa massacre, that was done by Democrats. Because they saw, damn, these black people are actually doing stuff for themselves. They created their own little business district. We can't let these second-class citizens show us that they're actually at our level. That hurt our interpretation, our view of them. And they went and destroyed Black Wall Street. That's what happened. Look it up. There was ex-slaves that died millionaires. 1920s. The black community, when they were being entrepreneurial, when they were thinking, let me do for myself. Oh, you don't want me in your hotel? I'm gonna build my own hotel. The black community, you're gonna hear this. You hear it first from Kenny from Talks with Kenny. In Black history, black people were the first one to do the parallel economy. Right now, conservatives are trying to build the parallel economy. Now we have Daily Wire. We have all these media companies that's coming up because progressives want to censor us, exclude us from the public square. So now we have to create our own public square. The black community was doing that. And it shows you that the Democrat Party never really changed. Plantation politics. They like to exclude people, discriminate against people. That's the Democratic playbook. That's the plantation politics. The Democrats love discriminating against people. They can't discriminate you on your race anymore, so they find something else to discriminate against you. And they still discriminate on race. Look at affirmative action. So instead of discriminating against black people, they discriminate for black people. But Democrats, this is how they play. They make sure they get something for it. Oh, we're entitled to your vote. That's why when Misha Manor switched parties, she got such a backlash for it. All that hate mail for it. Because, all we done for you? We discriminated for you? Because at the end of the day, Democrats like to play tick for tat. I scratch your back, you scratch mine. Right? And imagine this. I say as a conservative, hey, Donald Trump had lower black unemployment than Barack Obama, and he only had, at the time, 6% of the black vote. So imagine that. You, as a let's say if I looked at the black community as a voting bloc, you voted for a party only 6%, and they gave you a better outcome than the party you voted 94%. Imagine that. But this is what I'm saying. Democrats only do something for black people because they believe they get a benefit from it. Who really care for you? Someone that does something expecting something in return, or someone that does something regardless if they get something back for it. And this is why black men are moving to the Republican Party. Because black men were like, damn, we only voted for Trump 6%, and we got a better outcome economically under him than Obama? Oh, I got to give this man my vote. And it grew from 6% to 12% now, I believe. In the 2020, Trump had 12% of the black vote. That's why. Because outcomes, results. That's what men tend to focus on. Women tend to focus on, it's how you say it. Men care about what you said. Hey, I don't care how he said it. Is what he said true or false? Women care about how you say things. This is why women tend to be Democrats. That's why women tend to be liberals. Look, don't shoot the messenger. I'm spitting facts. I'm a married man. I've been with my wife for what? Since college. So what, 7 years? So no one can tell me nothing. Hey, I know. I care about what she said. She care about how I say things, how I deliver it. And that's what the Democrats, that's how the Democrats play it. Oh, we need to sell a message of hope, even if that hope is a lie. But I digress, man. Let's continue.
Their daughters are valedictorians and they have moved to the suburbs. I think that we need to realize that the government is today not in a very good position to address these problems. It doesn't have the resources, and public confidence in the government is at an all-time low.
When you talk about this culture or the pathology of the black community, I mean, reliance on government, the normalization of illegitimacy, the worship of the outlaw hero, and see these as kind of the negative attributes that in fact are keeping the black community back. I mean, others have pointed to those same attributes as almost kind of the evidence of the authenticity of black culture, saying that if you can't compete with white society, you have to have some esteem, and that this, in fact, we shouldn't be measuring black culture against white cultural yardsticks, I guess.
Well, that's the legacy of cultural relativism, which is the main target of my book, which says, in effect, that all cultures are equal and no culture can judge another by its own standard, and culture should not impose their values on each other. I argue that this relativism played an important historic role. It helped to undermine the old racism, which was based on the notion of a hierarchy. The old racists basically said that you have savages, you have barbarians, and you have civilization, and we whites are the only people capable of civilization.
Right.
Relativism was a way to undermine that racist totem pole, but it's created a new problem because it now makes it difficult to recognize that black culture is in some respects inferior to white culture, at least.
Hell, not even inferior to white culture. White culture is if you're looking at it from an academic standpoint, white culture is inferior to Asian culture, right? But if you look at it from an athletic standpoint, black culture is superior to all other cultures in America, right? It's based on context, right? And this is my biggest problem as a conservative, because as a conservative, I like empirical evidence, right? Empirical evidence is more objective than relativism. Liberals love relativism, right? They love rationale. Oh, I like to reason about how things should be. And conservatives want to rationalize and point out how things are. Hey, it ain't right or wrong. It just is. Hey, white people are performing better academically than black people. Black people, what are you doing? Oh, you don't teach your kids how to read. You don't spend any time. You're not involved in your skin's school curriculum, right? Your kids does statistically less homework than other groups of people, and you expect your kid to perform better academically than other groups of people? Bruh, black people understand, hey, if you don't put the time in basketball, you don't expect to be better than the person who does. But when it comes to other subjects and other arenas, they have this warped and confused idea that they're entitled to have the same outcomes as other groups of people, but they don't put in the same amount of time. Just look it up. Asian people do more homework statistically than any other groups of people in America. And I argue black people do less homework than any other groups of people in America. Based on that information alone, wouldn't it be an obvious standpoint that black people do worse in mathematics, have a low reading rates? Like, it explains why black students fall behind in education. Because of culture, because of decision making, because of child rearing, parenting. That's the core of all of it. This is the real legacy of slavery, if you want to play that game. Is the fact that the previous generation failed the current generation. Because the point of the previous generation is to pass down wisdom, to pass down a tradition that helps the future generation in a better spot than where the previous generation was. And we stopped doing that starting in the 1960s. Martin Luther King was a third generation college graduate. No one tells you that. People want to act like black people just started graduating college. No, black people have been graduating college. It's just we lost that. And I think this is what black history should be about. Teach the achievement of black people despite segregation, despite racism. Black people was able to start their own businesses. They had their own economy. There were slaves that died millionaires. They don't teach you this in Black History Month. This is what happened if a conservative teach black history. But hey, I digress.
Functionally inferior to achieve those ingredients of success that blacks and whites both want. And so what we need is a project of cultural restoration that is aimed at improving study habits, strengthening families. I think the three institutions that...
Since 96, Dinesh has been saying this. And people gonna come in here and say, Kenny, you're making that up off the top of your head. Well, I show you stories earlier in the video.
Need to be strengthened are the church, the family, and the small business. Those are the key to any restoration in the inner cities of the United States.
There has been, though, in recent years, a growth of a black middle class. And so there has been advancements that have been made. There's no question there's a disparity between that growth of the middle class and what appears to be a permanent underclass. But why are some of the members of the black community moving forward while others clearly aren't?
Well, it's one of the great ironies of desegregation and affirmative action. People forget that segregation subsidized the ghetto in a weird way, because segregation essentially guaranteed that a black lawyer, a black doctor, a black school teacher, a black drug dealer, and a black pimp all lived on the same street.
Yep.
And so with the middle class being forced to live in the inner city, you had a semblance of middle class norms, even amid segregation. What's happened now is because of opportunities and because of racial preferences and so on, middle class blacks, those with skills and resources, have left. So white...
And I want to interject. That's what happened with me. I got resources. Like, I don't want to tell you what I do for a living, but just financially, I'm the only breadwinner in my house. I'm a homeowner, 27 years old, 2 kids, a stay-at-home wife. I make I make a decent income. I have a skill that generates me a high income where I can afford to do these kind of things. And I couldn't live in a predominantly black society, neighborhood. Sorry. A lot of people here, I still have black people around me, but a lot of people here are mixed. Every family so far, this is just me. Maybe I'm just in Florida. So far, every black man I see here that's a father, biracial couple. Only one black father, I think he's with a black woman. I'm just stating the facts here. This is just been in my experience. And I think that's going to start becoming the norm. Because the black culture pushed men like me out of it. Hey, we don't want you. You're lame. We don't like the fact that you like to read, that you actually know what you're talking about, that you nerd out on financial stuff. You know stuff about politics. You don't just go along with the democratic narrative of things, that you don't blame your race for your failures in life. I always have a quote, and I always joke around with my friends, and I always say this. I'll say, hey, racism is only a minor inconvenience in my life. And a lot of black people get offended when I say it. But I say, oh, prove it to me. Prove me how my race stopped me from doing what I need to do in this life. I don't fail tests. I'm good at math. I read a lot. I speak proper English. I communicate well. What skill, what can stop me? Only I can stop me. If I didn't have these skills, it would be a lot harder for me to be economically successful. Yes or no? Because I legitimately think every bad thing, some way, somehow, it was my fault. I had a 50%. I'm 50% responsible for that interaction, because end of the day, I can choose. I completely have control over how I respond to these situations, and that's the kind of mentality that I want the black community to have. If black culture can take one thing from me, is that mentality that no one's gonna do nothing for me. I gotta do it for myself. Frederick Douglass, do for self. And that's what we lost in the 1920s when black community was building up Black Wall Street. That's how they thought. I'm going to do for myself. Oh, okay. The white people don't want me in this hotel. Let's start an entrepreneurship and let's build our own hotel. So our black people have something. During segregation, all that stuff, we had one of the lowest crime rates in our community. Black people in the 1940s was more married than white people. During segregation, we were 85% married during segregation. Lower crime rate. But now, lowest racism, lowest period of racism in American history. We have a higher single mother rate, high crime, killing each other 5 times more than other racial groups. But you can't point this out. Black people are killing each other more than the KKK ever did. And that's a fact, bro. And it's sad. It's sad. Your own people. We're killing each other more than lynching did historically. But the race hustlers don't have a problem with that. That's the problem with this. This is the problem with the black community right now. This is the cause of black failure. Not recognizing how we are harming ourselves with our own decision making. And when someone's pointing it out so we can change direction, you want to call them names. That's the problem I have with the black community. And this is what's going to cause the black failure. That they don't want to recognize what's in reality. Let's stop suffering from imagination. Because right now, racism is not a major problem in the black community. It's our internal decision making as a community. That's the reality of our situation. We're often more frightened than hurt. We suffer more from imagination than from reality, and that's the truth. I digress. Let's continue.
White flight in the 70s has been followed by black flight. And middle-class blacks have taken with them valuable economic and cultural
Black
resources.
flight.
So we have a seesaw effect.
Me.
The middle class has gone up, and the underclass has gone down. The conditions of the underclass have become worse in the past 25 years. And it is that is now the most serious challenge for public policy and for American culture.
Now, you reject the notion that American society is systemically racist, but you do say that we practice, which you've introduced a term, which is interesting, rational discrimination. That is that we do discriminate, but that there is a certain rationalism to the way we discriminate. And I think one of the examples that's used all the time is the cab driver who might be driving past a black youth in urban America will not pick them up because their experience is that a black youth is 5 times more likely to commit violent crime than...
If it's based on information and it's based on reality, it's not racism, right? If I see an Asian kid and I see a black kid, it's not me stereotyping the Asian kid and to assume that the Asian kid is going to be smarter than the black kid. It's through my own valid experience, data that I have observed, right? And the reality of the situation is, how the hell that Asians make 50% of the population in Yale and all these higher Ivy League colleges? The odds are in my favor that I'm going to be right if I pick the Asian kid, right? Knowing their culture, knowing their background, knowing what they do. I know all their leading indicators. So I say, hey, the Asian kid is going to be smarter than the black kid. And the odds are in my favor that I'm going to be right. That's not racism. That's pattern recognition, which is what I pointed out in the beginning of the video. But I digress.
Than a white youth. But that analysis, what does that do for the black youth who is law-abiding and isn't part of that underclass who gets passed by the cab driver?
That's a very good question. And see, I think our debate on this kind of subject is terribly polarized and irrational now, because what happens in effect is that black activists say the cab driver is a bigot. Even if it happens to be a Lebanese cab driver or a West Indian or a Nigerian or a black cab driver, acting no differently than a white cab driver, they say, well, he's just internalized white racism. So the cab driver is presumed to be a bigot, and the cab driver presumes that the black activist is just crazy because he cannot understand that all the cab driver is trying to do is get home to his wife and family.
Yep. There's other factors that come into it, and it seems like there's this entitlement from the black community that everyone has to understand their plight. But the black community don't have to understand other people's plight, right? There's a poll, Rasmussen poll that I showcased in one of my videos. I forget the video, but it showed who is more likely to be racist. White people said black, Asian people said black, Hispanic people say black people said black. So black people have no problem assuming or stereotyping people and being racist towards those people, right? But when they get the same energy that they give, they want to cry victim. And this is what I think is turning off a lot of people from the black community and helping the black community. This is why you get Scott Adams saying what he said. Hey, just leave him alone. And then they get mad. But then but these are the same liberals that will come in and say, hey, we need a safe space away from white people. Effectively, you and Scott Adams are saying the same thing. You both want segregation. You both want to be left alone. Okay. Freedom of association. That's their right to do that. And I never understand the black community, this need of them to be accepted by other people. I don't need validation from other people, right? You like me, right? Because to me, I see like you benefit more knowing me than I know you. Like that's the kind of mentality that I walk with, right? I see that, oh, it's your loss. Like I'm gonna take it or leave it kind of guy. And I think that's the attitude black community needs to do. But I think the black community will recognize that they don't have the skills to actually have that kind of esteem about themselves. And I think this is why they rely so heavily on white liberals to speak for them, to champion their cause, to help them, right? Because the white liberal has convinced the black community that they're helpless and they can't do anything for themselves. Enforced dependence. If you look at all the democratic policies, regardless if they're catering to Hispanic people, Asian people, poor people, black people, it's centered around enforced dependence. The Democrats want you dependent on them so that way they're guaranteed to get your vote. And this is one of my biggest talking points for why black people should stop voting Democrat and should be more willing to vote Republican, is that the black people have been voting Democrat for 50 years. And currently in 2023, The Democratic Party is guaranteed to get at least 85% of the black vote. My argument as a conservative is that the black America, the Democrats have no incentive to actually change or improve your situation because they know that if they change nothing, all they have to do is give you lip service, pander to you, tell you what you want to hear. They're guaranteed to get 85% of your vote. So what incentive does a Democratic politician have to actually address your situation? All they're going to do is sell you hope, right? Make you feel comfortable in your situation, and then rank in the votes, right? And the change is not going to happen until black community shows a willingness to vote for the Republican Party. Because at the end of the day, if no one has to compete for your vote, they don't have to improve their proposition for it. And this is how black community got into an abusive relationship with the Democratic Party. But I'm done rambling. I got to finish this video in 20 minutes. So let's get into it.
The concept of rational discrimination allows us to say that we have a distinction to be made between rationality and morality. The cab driver is acting rationally. He is trying to protect his property and security. And the law-abiding young black who's passed up by a cab is appealing to morality. What he's saying is, I have a right to be treated as an individual based on the content of my character. To which the cab driver responds, I would love to do that, but frankly, I'm not in a position to get to know my customers personally. If I could ask you about your family, about your crime rate, about whether you have a criminal record and so on, it would be one thing. So we have a tragedy. And I think what we have to do is ask whether the law-abiding African-American's right not to be inconvenienced, right to get a cab is more important, or the cab driver's right to protect his life and his cab.
And this is why I say racism is an inconvenience in my life, is because a lot of people, just based on the color of my skin, they'll think either I'm uneducated, right? I don't know what I'm talking about because I happen to be a black guy, right? Like I get this with white liberals a lot. When I tell a white liberal, hey, I'm going to vote for Republicans this year. Oh, I'm voting Republican. Oh, I'm voting for Trump. Oh, I'm voting for Ron DeSantis. They look at me like, oh, you're voting against your best interest. Well, how do you know that? All you know is that I'm black. You don't know anything else about me. You don't understand my position, my financial position. You don't even understand what I believe in, how I think about education, how I view all these other standards. But you are to make a snapshot judgment of me and saying I'm voting against my best interest because you have a preconceived notion of what I'm supposed to want, what I'm supposed to like, right? And this is another subtle thing about liberals, that liberals don't even understand that they do this stuff, right? There was a video out there that there was a Trump supporter. He was a black man, right? He had a Trump hat, and a liberal coming here confronting him, like almost chastising him. It's like, why are you wearing that hat? Asking him questions. But if he was a white guy wearing a Trump hat, he would get a different reaction. Double standards, racial standards. But liberals ain't racist. Okay. The most racist people I know in my life were liberals. But not like, oh, aggressive, like just matter of fact, oh, they have this perception and view of you. Yeah, black people can't be even engineers. They need us to help them become engineers. They need affirmative action to become engineers. Black people can't make it in education under their own skill and ability. White liberals are more likely to think that, while conservatives are like, no, we're not lowering the bar for anybody. This is the standard. If you don't meet the standard, you don't get the job. That's how conservatives view issues. And I think that's the better environment for black people. Because if you approach the same thing as sports, right? Because sports is the ultimate meritocracy. Black people perform very well when they're forced to strive for the expectation. Oh, you want to be a point guard? You need to learn how to dribble. You need to learn how to shoot. You need to be able to hit free throws at a certain percentage. That's the standard for a point guard, or you ain't making the team. Black people can rise to that occasion. And I'm saying, hey, let's have black people excel at sports. All I'm saying is, hey, do the same skill, do the same training, do the same time investment as you do in sports, you do into academics, right? Everyone knows talent beats hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard. And all I'm saying is, black people, work hard at academics. Y'all not putting the same amount of time in academics compared to the Asian people. And this is why Asian people are overrepresented in academia, in college, in high corporate jobs. But instead of following the playbook, hey, this is working for the Asian people, it should work for us. Black people said, nah, that's an Asian thing to do. And these standards are against black culture. It's just, you just want to stay the same. Black community just want to stay the same, and they want the environment to change for them. Well, that's not how reality works. That's not how life works. No one rolls out the red carpet and bend over backwards for a group of people, because eventually people are going to get tired of bending over backwards for black people. I'm just saying that right now. I'm just saying that right now because black people are tired of black people doing all this ish. And you see it. People are getting tired of the race narrative. Tired of another race hoax. Jesse Smollett. Who else? All these race hustlers. Black people are tired. Especially immigrant blacks. Especially first generation blacks. We tired of it. Because we see, yo, my mom would not accept me saying, oh, it's because of racism that I failed the math test, mommy. My mom would look at me and she would go, boy, you better go study. Like I didn't catch you playing PlayStation 2 late at night. That's why you failed the test, because you wasn't studying. You're grounded, right? Expectation. That's how it is in an immigrant household. If you're from an immigrant household, you know what I'm talking about. African Americans may not understand. Maybe they already got too comfortable having low expectations for themselves and their children. But that's not how it rolls in immigrant households. This is what me and my wife relate on. Even though my wife is a Hispanic woman, right? Based on the race, I'm not supposed to relate to her. Me and my wife are first generation Americans. We can relate. Oh yeah, my parents had this expectation for me too. My parents told me, oh, I came to this country because I wanted a better opportunity for my family. We had you, and we put that expectation on you. Say, hey, we expect great things from you, Kenny. You and your brothers. My wife can relate to me like that. No African American woman can relate to me in that expectation. I'm being serious now. I'm being very open about that. But yeah, I digress.
And I think that in this case, it is the cab driver's right that is more important.
So you go a step further. You say that rather than focusing on the cab driver as a bigot, with this law-abiding black youth who can't get the cab ride, or in fact gets stopped unduly by the police because they have that same kind of socialization, that same experience of dealing with black violence, black crime. What he should be doing is blaming his black brethren, who
Yep, holding each other accountable. Now, that's not the case anymore. This is 96. In 2023, a cop ain't going to pull you over, but usually the cops are responding to something. That's a fact. No one can tell me, oh, they just pulled me over because I was walking black. No. Hey, we're looking for somebody. You happen to fit the description. We want to ask you some questions. What usually happens? I seen it firsthand. Black man act all nasty, already acting defensive, and usually that comes off as suspicious for a police officer. I'm just saying, because I've been stopped before, but I don't react the same way. I react. I say, "Oh, how you doing, officer? Like, well, how can I help you? Okay, we're looking for somebody. You happen to fit the description. Can we ask you some questions? Sure, whatever. Right? It already died the tensions down, because end of the day, when you get stopped by a cop, you there's two ways you can respond. You either can escalate the situation or you can de-escalate the situation. And treating black people like retarded children is not the answer. Sorry, not sorry. But yeah, I digress.
Who is a criminal, and that
or if not blaming, at least recognizing that is the source of the problem. Look, immigrant groups have always said, for example, Italian communities living in New York would always be exceptionally angry if the grandson Vito was caught stealing or was caught involved in some crime, because they would say, look, you are giving the Italian community a bad name.
Yep. Haitians think the same way. My mom used to put that in my head. Oh, you making the family look bad by failing the test, Kenny. By getting suspended from school, Kenny. From getting into fights, Kenny. You making your family look bad, right? That's a very conservative idea. That hey, you don't just represent yourself. You represent your family. You're part of a group. You have a duty and obligation to your family to represent them well. That's a conservative idea. A liberal idea is, hey, I only represent myself, and you should only judge me for me because I'm an individual, right? That's the other extreme of it. And that's how a lot of black people walk around. Oh, I don't have no loyalty to my family. I'll cut my family off if I feel like they're if they're against me too much. That's how a lot of black people walk. Black people have no respect for the structure, the family structure. That's why they have such a high single mother rate. Until the ish hit the fan, and now they're calling you, asking for help. And I'm like, yo, you burned the bridge between us. Now you're in a tough spot. Now you expect me to just forget all the things you've done and help you? That's how a lot of black people walk around. I'm being honest. I'm speaking from personal experience. I had cousins that never want to talk to me just because they disagree with me on something. But the minute they run into some trouble, now they want to make peace with me. And I'm like, no, you stay over there. You show me who you are already. When you need something, that's when you're. But when you think you don't need me, I saw the real you, and I can't turn that off anymore. A lot of black people walk around with that entitlement, and they treat other races of people the same way. Oh, I'm owed something. No, you're owed nothing. This is where the reparations come in. Oh, you owe me. Y'all white people gotta pay me back. Who? White people wasn't alive. You wasn't a slave either. So what they have to pay you back for? Oh, your failures in life, your lack of achievement? No, that's you. That's a personal problem. That's the previous generation fault. That's your parents' fault. They didn't teach you the proper skills and advantages to set you up for success. And that's the truth. And I'm not repeating that with my kids. I'm sorry. Look, I'm sorry.
In other words, you are making us all look like we are part of the mafia or part of organized crime, and we will be especially severe on you. There is absolutely no such accountability, at least on no systematic level in the black community. That the reason that the cab driver is acting this way is because the Sentencing Commission, a liberal advocacy group, recently released a study. 1 in 3 African Americans in the United States is on any given day in prison, on parole, or on probation. These are staggeringly high crime rates. And the point is, by changing those patterns of behavior, we make...
If the black community shamed a lot of black men for committing crimes, selling drugs, I think we'll get a different black America than we have today. But instead, we shame the smart black people, the educated black people, the black people that talk white, right? We shame them, and we wonder why there's less of them and more of the I do drugs, I steal, I steal, kill, I'm thuggo. Black community wonder why they have more men like that, because that's what's incentivized. The women talk about, I want me a thug, right? You see the music that black people listen to. Look what we push up. Look at who we praise in our culture. What you praise, you give an incentive of who you want the kids to be, right? Who you admit or who you don't give praise to. You don't give praise to the black doctor. Some black people can't even name me the richest black man in America. Newsflash, it's not LeBron. It's not Jay-Z. It's a dude in the financial sector. Robert Smith, if I remember his name correctly. Someone probably correct me if I'm wrong, but yeah, Robert Smith. A lot of black people go, who? It's not Jay-Z. Because that's the culture. The culture doesn't lift up Robert Smith. Smart man. Right? Banker. Worth a billy. But no, you know Jay-Z, Michael Jordan, LeBron James, but they're poorer than that guy. But you know them. Why? Because that's the culture. That's what the culture pushes the black community to strive for. And what you strive for is what you get. Hey, you know. But it's racism's fault. Lacking accountability is what's the major cause of black failure in America. And I'll stand on that. I'll debate that and discuss that with anybody. I digress.
Rational discrimination less likely. I argue that that's the best anti-racism now.
But, and in doing this, I mean, you also kind of excoriate a lot of the black leadership. You call them race merchants, the notion that they profit, they exist by virtue of having an underclass.
They need that. Show me the incentives that show you the outcome. If someone's a race hustler and they're only known, Al Sharpton, right? He's only known because he's a civil rights leader. The minute the cause is gone, what's the effect? He's out of a job. He loses relevancy. He's not famous no more. He wants to keep that. So what's the incentive you putting on Al Sharpton? Oh, I need to look for more racism. If I can't find racism, I'll make it up. This is why you got Jesse Smollett making these race hoax. Racism on short supply in 2023 today. It is. Because end of the day, white guilt is black power. That's the reality of it. And the minute white guilt don't exist, bye-bye black power. Bye-bye using your race as a cudgel to shame and demean people just because they're a different pigmentation than you. Oh, I lose my victimhood status. I lose my alibi. They want to hold on to all that and a bag of chips. This is why they fight so hard to believe that racism is a big problem in their life. And when they see a black man like me say, hey, racism is a minor inconvenience in my life, they go, oh my God, he's hurting the narrative. We need to shame him. We need to call him names. We need to come out in droves against him. I don't care. I don't care what's the popular opinion in the black community. I care is, hey, if what I'm saying true or what I'm saying is false. And if you say it's false, you better give me a good reason why. Because I got all this evidence. I got all these observations. I digress.
Well, I say that they recognize that the scandalous sufferings of the underclass provide the political capital that justifies transfer payments to the middle class. In other words, right now, for example, there are programs that mainly benefit middle-class blacks in which the government provides set-asides, discounts in buying radio stations, preferences to get into Princeton, and so on. Believe me, there are no blacks very few blacks from the ghetto going to Princeton. It's the sons and daughters of Jesse Jackson, of government workers, of Hispanic doctors.
Yeah, affirmative. I made this point about my inconvenient truths about affirmative action. Affirmative action doesn't help poor black people. It helps rich, middle class black people because they have the means to actually take advantage of her affirmative action. If a poor black person is got into a Yale as an affirmative action hire admissions, statistically they don't have the skill set, or they don't have the behaviors, or they weren't taught the traits to actually take advantage of that opportunity. And this is why kids that who gets their admissions through affirmative action or gets hired through affirmative action have higher dropout rates and are more likely to be fired than a black person who didn't get into a corporation through affirmative action, right? This is what happens. This is why mismatch theory is a valid critique against affirmative action. Hey, look at the results. You put in affirmative action, you had higher dropout rates. Less black people graduated as a result. You had more black people, but more black people also dropped out of class, out of school. How you explain that? You setting up these kids for failure because they didn't have the skills to begin with to be there. That's a problem. But hey, you want to keep lowering standards. Hey, you want to keep saying, hey, this shouldn't be a bar exam for lawyers anymore because it disproportionately discriminates against black people. And then when people look at a black lawyer and they decide, oh, I don't want to do business with that black lawyer, you're going to be like, oh, that's racism. Well, you causing it. Cause and effect. If you say a certain group of people do not need to be tested, then what's the point of them actually rising to the occasion? They're just going to stay at the level they're at. And when people decide pattern recognition, be like, okay, let's avoid black doctors. Let's avoid black lawyers because they don't get any testing. When they were testing, they were failing behind. Now, all of a sudden, they make up 22% of the workforce. Oh, no, I don't trust that. I don't know if they're that good. And then these same black lawyers are going to cry out racism. But they don't look at the liberal policies that went ahead, remove the standardized testing that would have resolved all this concern that people have. No one can remove human biology. Human biology is pattern recognition. This is how humans stayed alive throughout all its history. And they ain't going nowhere anytime soon. And if you want to call that racism, hey, that's your business. But that's the reality. You remove a policy, standardized testing, that would test people's competence for the position because it discriminates. You say it disproportionately it negatively affect black people. But that's because the black people don't have the skills or academic ability to actually fulfill the standard that's set by the bar. And because of that, you want to remove the bar. And because you remove the bar, people react to that and say, oh, black people weren't capable before the bar. They ain't going to be capable after you remove the bar. And that's when it calls what? Discrimination. Cause and effect. But these liberals, they don't think. They're very reactionary thinkers. They don't think long term. They don't look down the road. There's a concept called second order thinking. A lot of people don't have that thinking. And I think our society and our politics will benefit a lot if people understand second order thinking. Look it up, guys. Fascinating concept. I digress. Let's continue.
And so on. So the point is this: if somehow the ghetto disappeared overnight, if it could somehow end, isn't it true that Americans would immediately begin to say, well, why is Jesse Jackson's kids, who have every advantage in life, getting a preference to go to Berkeley or getting a government contract? The political capital that supports these preferences would disappear. So there is a weird dependency. It's not that the underclass is dependent on the civil rights establishment, it's the other way around.
But that says a terrible thing about the motivation of a lot of these things.
I mean, a lot of people describe false motivations on me. Oh, because I'm speaking the truth. Oh, you're grifting. You want to be on a right-wing channel. But no one says anything about Jesse Jackson, Al Sharpton, about how their jobs essentially rely on the fact that racism needs to exist for them to have any relevancy and wealth. But no one want to call them grifters. This is the hypocrisy of the black community. They want to be skeptical of conservatives, but they don't share that same level of skepticism towards liberals, progressives. That's my problem. But I digress.
Can't truly believe that Jesse Jackson wouldn't be absolutely delighted in the eradication of poverty or
it's a conflict of interest, sir. That's why I agree.
And he's not doing this so his kids can go to Princeton on
I'm not saying that, but I think there's a sophisticated form of economic and political analysis that recognizes now that institutions develop vested interests. For example, the civil rights movement has an institutional interest in blaming racism for black problems and in not paying much attention to the most tragic sufferings of the underclass. And therefore, if you look at a group like the NAACP, it's much more concerned about finding out that there are people who go to Denny's who can't get a meal, and much less concerned, for example, with programs to strengthen black families.
Now, you've obviously provided, some intellectual depth to a relatively conservative argument. And as a consequence of, the power of your intellectual argument, I mean, you're taking seriously, whether people agree with you or not. I mean, do you worry, however, that some of the arguments that you put forward provide refuge for the true racist? I mean, there's some stuff in here that if I was David Duke, I'd be going, ooh, boy, now I've got a really, really good intellectual foundation.
Well, you can say that about almost anything, right? You could also say the same thing about when liberals come up here and say, hey, black women are most effective if you remove abortion, right? If I'm a racist eugenicist, I'm going, yes, Democrats, keep pushing black women to abort their kids more than they give birth to their kids in New York City. Oh, that's a good thing. We need to eradicate these black people, right? A racist should be happy about abortion, but no one throws that argument for liberals and what they stand for. Now, do they? Right? This is what I'm saying. Like it's not valid in any pursuit of truth. It's all about constructing narratives, right? Because anybody can do that. I just did it. I just made abortion look like the most racist thing in America because it is, right? But me pointing out truths, hey, black on black crime is a bigger problem in the black community than worrying about white people coming in here and lynching us. Oh my God, Kenny, you being racist. Oh, you covering it up for white supremacy. But then you make the abortion argument, the same liberals out here running, making excuses for it. That if abortion was banned in 1972, black community would have been the second largest voting bloc in the U.S. today. A lot of political power that would have come with that. But black liberals don't see no problem with that. Oh, black women should be able to do whatever they want to do. Oh, even though effectively you're doing exactly what Margaret Sanger, a racist, wanted you to do. You're weeds in this country and you're taking each other out on your own accord. Oh, David Duke would be doing like this too. Like, come on. Is this false framing that racists are only right wing? No, racists are everywhere. Left, right, center, it don't matter. But this is the narrative I'm talking about. If you're the type of person that think only Republicans or conservatives can be racist, you're living in an echo chamber and you're living under a rock. But I digress.
For my otherwise, creepy and repugnant views.
This is what I call the sleeping with the enemy problem, that there's a sense that you should not make legitimate arguments because illegitimate use may be made of them. I think that the opposite is true, that the public taboos surrounding race, the fact that people cannot speak what's on their mind.
It's a form of censorship.
On campus, as young people will come up to me and they say, well, much of what you say makes sense, but I'm white. I could never say that. I would be hounded off the podium.
Well, you talk about your own ethnic immunity.
That's right.
That by virtue of coming from Bombay, you can say things that a white guy couldn't say.
And I'm trying to use that immunity to widen the parameters of debate in the right tone, because I believe that when these topics are not addressed, then the Dukes and the Farrakhan's of this world are strengthened, because they say, in effect, we are speaking to the secret, suppressed longings of people. The mainstream politicians won't touch the issue. So there's been a racial polarization in which people on the right and on the left have been strengthened by this kind of radicalization. I think that when these...
And this is why using the argument or trying to censor someone's speech when they're saying something true is, oh, you're not a person of that right or that race, therefore you can't speak on it. You bolden racial supremacists, black supremacists and white supremacists. You embolden them. Oh, you're a white person, you can't talk about that. Right? Oh, you're a black person, you don't understand that. Racism. Right? And if you want a unity, right? If you want a multicultural democracy, there needs to be some abstract unifying culture where Americans can criticize other Americans regardless of skin color. But if you don't want no social cohesion, no social unity, this is what you're going to get. People dividing themselves based on their differences, not on what unites them. Right? This is why I'm a big fan of Vivek. This is why I'm a big fan of nationalism. That, hey, there needs to be some form of assimilation. Hey, we are all Americans. We have a duty and obligation to America. We're all loyal to America. We want America to be a better country. Therefore, we must point out the actual problems affecting Americans, whether you're black, white, or Hispanic. And any American should be able to point out the problems in America, regardless of who is disproportionately affected by said thing. And I think that's a message that we need to be pushing forward. But I digress.
These issues are aired, are candidly discussed, that the effect will be to come up with more sensible policies.
Now, it'd be no surprise that liberals would not embrace your analysis or your book. But you've had surprisingly little support from the conservative black community. In fact, I think some of your former colleagues have resigned from the American Enterprise Institute, which you're part, and said some terrible things, the Mark Furman of public policy. Why aren't you getting more support from the conservative elements of the community?
Well, two black conservatives have criticized me quite harshly, and one of them, I think, in a rather ill-considered moment that he, I think, has regretted, said that. That's an example of the kind of poisonous rhetoric, I think, that prevents the debate from moving forward.
Exactly. And I don't have that problem. Like, if you're a person and you happen to not be black and you point out some facts and you can demonstrate to me it's true, it's not just based on a popular opinion and you're just referencing someone else's opinion, I can take your argument and concede it and take it without getting emotional over it. And I think that's one of the advantages I have. I don't tend to get emotional. I don't react very emotional to things that people seem to take issue with. Because I think black people as a whole give the N-word too much power over themselves, right? And people use it as a tool against them to get people not to think rationally. And I think this is the problem in the black community. We lack discipline. Discipline is freedom for a reason. If you cannot delay gratification, hey, instant gratification, get outraged and mad that an Indian man is pointing out problems in my community. And it goes against my preconceived notion that racism is the biggest issue facing me as a black man. Instead of actually sitting down, okay, let's take his argument and see if there's any validity to it. You want to be outraged. I'm just saying, like, sometimes I think black men are some of the most emotional men in the world sometimes, bro. Women are supposed to be emotional, not men. And when I hear dudes get crying over something, and I'm like, yo, bruh, what you crying for, bruh? No one's going to do anything for you. Why are you expecting white people to do something for you? I thought racism exists. If racism exists, why are you expecting white people to do stuff for your benefit? Makes no damn sense. I don't understand people who do this stuff. This is how I know this is how I know these people are race hustlers, bro. You say racism is a big issue in America, legacy of slavery, all this stuff, yada, yada, yada. But you're sitting here crying and complaining to white people to do something for you. And me pushing a message where, hey, you do for yourself. Hey, you educate your kid. Hey, you make better decisions. Hey, you start more businesses and stop looking at other people to do something for you. I get called a coon, Uncle Tom sellout, but not you. Craziness. Like, what a world we live in. But that's what happens when you follow a narrative and not the results. But I digress.
But other black conservatives, including Thomas Sowell, many others have rushed to my defense. So there are two sides of this. And I also point out that there are many liberal scholars, African-American scholars, ahead of the NAACP, ahead of the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, who have praised the book. So the book is getting a very unexpected reception across the spectrum.
Well, you do more than simply analysis. I mean, you're prescriptive at the end, and you talk about the fourth option, an option that hasn't been explored yet, where we should have governments who are race neutral, but we should allow the private sector to discriminate, to be free to discriminate. And you justify this, that this in fact will help black people. Again, help me with that particular.
Well, actually,
I already gave an example about Black Wall Street, how during segregation, black people were performing economically at their best, right? Ex-slaves die as millionaires, low crime rate, high birth rate, entrepreneurial, right? That's I think that's where Dinesh is hinting at, like, hey, like, when you don't force people to do a certain action, people are more likely to be more open. Hey, I'm not it's the argument that a lot of conservatives like to do about taxes. If you give somebody of your own free will money and charity to the homeless man, people say you're a good person. But are you still a good person if the government put a gun to your head and say, hey, if you don't give that man $50, I'll shoot you dead right here and now? No, it has a different context. The actions is still the same, but the intention is different. And it's the same thing with these anti-discrimination laws as well. Is that it kind of forces people to do something, right? And also, this is a point I borrowed from Eric July, and this is also a black libertarian talking point, is that when you have anti-discrimination laws, you allow black people to fund covert racists and let them do business. Because if there was no anti-discrimination law, the racist will be more comfortable being out and open about his racism, so that way the black dollar can avoid them and actually give money to people that actually support them. Right? That's another argument. That's a libertarian argument. Right? As a conservative, I'm fine with some government intervention. Right? And this is one of them. Hey, anti-discrimination law. But the black libertarians, they have a good argument about why you should allow discrimination in the private sector. because it allows the black people to know who's a racist, who's not, and to avoid them. So something to think about, right? But when black people only sit here and only listen to liberals about these issues, they don't see the full picture and the full options that they have in front of them, and why a black person will be conservative, why a black person will be libertarian, right? Another problem the black community seems to have is they seem to be in an echo chamber. They seem to push for conformity. On one side of their mouth, they'll say there's no black conformity. We're not a monolith. But then the minute you see a black man disagree about racism and the impact of racism in his life and in the community, Uncle Tom Cool Seller Trader. Right? It seems like the black community only wants conformity. Like this is a quote I always want to say. If you are expected to think the same about a topic, are you really thinking about the topic? That's something for people in the comment section to digest for themselves.
I didn't begin the book thinking that, and yet then I discovered that ethnic groups in the United States have always succeeded by helping their own guys. Ethnocentrism in that sense is good when it is harnessed for gain. So if you look at the Italians, you look at the Jews, you look at what the Koreans are doing now. You go to a Korean grocery store in Washington, D.C., and you peek in the back, 15 other Koreans. It's one way that immigrant groups have overcome their historic obstacles, lack of not speaking the language.
Yeah, Hispanics, I saw this played out firsthand in Miami, right? I'm from Miami, grew up in Miami. Hispanics always lived amongst other Hispanics. This is how Hispanics can still get away with only speaking Spanish and still be productive in the society, in Florida. But the problem with that is that Hispanic speaking only person can only work in Hialeah, right? He can't move outside of that arena. So there's more investment from the community to actually invest in its own community. I'm just saying. So his thing, what Dinesh is pointing out here in 1996 has a working functionality if you just look for it hard enough. If you go to Hialeah Gardens, is another country, bro. You go in there, you don't know how to speak Spanish, you stuck. But this is validity to what he's saying, that you give people more opportunity to actually help people move up in society, right? But I digress. It makes it easier to transition and assimilate in a way. Now, I think the Democrats take it too far by translating things into Spanish and stuff and coddling and enable people to continue speaking the non-official language of the country, which is, like I said, limits your economic opportunity because a Spanish speaker can only work in a Spanish-speaking area of the country. But hey, they can accept that trade-off and not cry about, I'm not richer than the other person. Then hey, you make your choice. You made your bed, lay in it. But I digress.
For example, if you don't
this Korean grocery store owner is functionally practicing discrimination. He's not hiring quotas.
He's discriminating in favor of his own, and I think that that's good.
But I mean, that's happening already. You're not seeing any people saying that the real problem with American society is that black businessmen are hiring too many white people.
No. See, what we have now is a double standard in which discrimination on the part of minorities is okay, but discrimination on the part of whites is not. The Republicans have talked about the race-neutral society, color blindness. Well, the problem with color blindness is because blacks are not competitive with other groups. If you strictly enforced color blindness in the public sector and the private sector, there would be almost no blacks at MIT. Blacks would begin to vanish from many selective professions. The irony of legalizing private discrimination is I am quite confident that there would be far more discrimination in favor of blacks than against blacks. Virtually every public company today, IBM, AT&T, Procter & Gamble, discriminates in favor of blacks, and that would continue, and I think it's okay. It should continue.
You don't think that discrimination...
Remember, this isn't 96, so this is where everyone was still in this hype train that, we're giving more opportunities to black people, and they'll come up in this... But 27 years later, we're still in the same spot. Not much progress happened, right? People start finding out, damn, we're setting up these black people for failure. We're setting them up for more likelihood to get laid off, to drop out of school, right? But, I digress.
Discrimination is a function of the kind of the government sanction that says affirmative action is good?
Not anymore. It used to be. But what's happened is that these companies and these universities have set up affirmative action sectors within their companies so that even if the government were to step back, I think many of these policies would continue. In fact, when I was a member of the Reagan administration, the government had talked about ending racial preferences, and there was an outcry.
Yep.
And many heads of companies said, oh, no, don't do that. Or if you do that, we will continue to do what we're doing.
Yep.
Affirmative action.
And that happened today, right? With Harvard. Harvard said, we're still going to do it. We're still going to do race-based admissions. Right? They went against the Supreme Court ruling. in my view, it ain't gonna help the black people. You're just coddling the black people. Oh, I love you, I love you, I love you. And then why it's this concept of the dark mother that Jordan Peterson mentioned before in one of his books, is that the dark mother, she thinks she's helping you. She said, oh, you don't need to do anything, baby. I'll take care of you. I'll feed you. I'll cook for you. You don't have to learn any skills. Just stay here, be comfortable. But the long-term effects is the mother's going to die one day. And when the mother dies, the kid is left helpless and useless. He can't do anything for himself. He's 40 years old. He's like, yo, I don't know how to do anything, right? Because the mom was selfish, right? Because the mom wanted the child dependent on her. And that's how the Democrats treat the black community. That's how liberals treat the black community. They want the community to be dependent on them. But then when the liberals hit a position where the liberals don't need the black vote anymore, what's going to happen to the black community? The black community is going to be left on its own. And it doesn't have any skills, no orientation, no concept of having to do things for itself, because all its life has been dependent on the Democratic Party, aka the mother. And when the mother passed away, because the mother didn't want the kids to leave her, right? Because at the end of the day, the mother passed away. That means she don't need the company of her child anymore. Now the kid is left to himself to fend for himself. What's worse? Your father telling you, hey, I need to prepare you for the world so when I'm not here, you can still function in society? Or someone saying, hey, you don't have to do anything for society. I'll do everything for you, right? But you become dependent on me, right? This is the difference between a mother and a father. This is why the black community is the way it is, because it gets too much mothering and not enough fathering. When I became a father, I started understanding why my father was stern on me, why my father was hard on me, because he was trying to prepare me for the world and not coddle me to dependence. It's just a different view, right? I digress.
Action has, in that sense, become a way of life. I'm worried that if we outlaw affirmative action, a great deal of government intrusion would be required to go to private companies and force them, don't act this way, don't hire this guy instead, almost on the same scale as was required a generation ago to uproot the old discrimination.
You have no concerns that we might revert back to the old Jim Crow status where I'm a restaurant owner and I just say, well, then no black people are going to eat here?
Well, remember that the restaurant owners did that in part because the prejudices against blacks eating alongside whites in restaurants were so severe that many restaurant owners, in effect, claimed racial discrimination. They said, we don't have anything against blacks, but none of our customers would come. Well, this is this is one way in which the world has changed. And moreover, the law in the United States basically says if you have a restaurant or a motel and you put up a sign open to the public, you are a quasi-public institution, so you are held to different standards than, say, a private company.
What do you say to the well-meaning critics who say, you have opened up a debate that has been too long muted or one-sided? And in fact, there are serious problems with affirmative action and the preferential treatment system that we have put forward. But in doing it the way you've done it, you inflame the argument further. You make black people crazy. You make black people say horrible things about you. You give...
Well, this is where I disagree with this guy. No one made black people do anything. When you make a choice to disparage someone, when you make a choice to slander someone, when you make the choice to mock somebody, you own that decision. That's not the other person's fault. Oh, he made me react this way. No, you chose to react that way. And that's the problem. The culture, America, treats black people like retarded children. And some black people, a lot of black people, take advantage of that fact. Oh, people are not gonna blame me for acting the way I did. This is why black people still get emotional when someone calls them the N-word. Because then they feel justified. Oh, I can act a fool up here and I'll be justified because he called me the N-word. And that's socially acceptable for me to act like that over that. Right? Oh, I acted this way because of racism. I acted this way because someone came on my campus and put a sign that America isn't racist, so I'm justified in acting a fool. And then when black conservatives like me or a conservative like me call it out, say, hey, look, you responded ill here. You're only perpetuating the negative imagery of the black community. I get a bunch of hate comments. I get a bunch of, oh, you're ignorant, Kenny. Oh, you don't understand. No, I do understand. I understand that I represent my people, I represent my family, and I represent myself. And I'm not going to represent myself negatively or badly. So if you're going to make a claim, I'll say, okay, I'll debate that claim. And people are going to look at back and be like, damn, this man carried himself so well. It changed my view on black people. But black people don't think that long term anymore. They think, well, what's convenient, what's good, right? What's acceptable, and this is the acceptance that black people get. Oh, you caused the black people to act that way. I caused him to curse me out, call me every name in the book. I caused that. Oh, you caused that hate comment. When are people responsible for the actions and behaviors of other people? When we start doing that? And then they wonder why black people have a lack of accountability. Yeah, because we accept it. And I bet you if society stopped accepting that, I bet it stops happening. Oh, you disagree with him. He has freedom of speech, but that does not entitle you to insult this man. You got to go to jail, sir. If more of that happened, and then they look in the comment section and see people reacting, saying, yeah, that black man deserved it. He shouldn't have been acting like that. He carried himself badly there. If we had a culture like that, a lot of black people will change how they approach people now. But as long as you keep tolerating, you're going to keep getting it. Show me the incentive, I'll show you the outcome.
Ammunition to white racists who otherwise would be left to their anti-intellectualism.
I think the opposite is true. I think this is a subject on which many normally sensible people lose their reason. And so, for example, you have a Washington Post reviewer of my book say, D'Souza promotes theories of genetic superiority, even though I explicitly say the opposite. Or you will have people say, well, he says that slavery is a racist institution, exclamation point, as though this settles the matter. I make an effort in this book to address questions in a sober, in a scholarly tone, beginning with assumptions, then raising questions, then looking at evidence, then a lot of interviews. I talk to black scholars, white scholars. I have a range of opinion in the book. So I think the book is exactly the kind of sober investigation that is provocative intellectually, because it takes things people, quote, know to be so, and says, is that really true?
Yep.
That's bound to generate a certain degree of angst and a certain degree of outrage. But I think that the dust will settle on it, and when people dispassionately view it, they will see that a lot of good has been achieved. So the book is a form of shock treatment.
Yeah, exactly. Right, and I agree with the whole synopsis of what Dinesh D'Souza has claimed in the book, right? Because it would be an end of racism if we look at it soberly, if we don't get so emotional, so reactionary. And this is how the left plays it. This is how black people play it. They play it like, oh, I'm going to act emotionally outraged. I'm going to act that I'm offended, right? I'm going to classify this as hate speech because I don't have an argument to actually counteract some of your observations and some of the evidence and facts that you brought about, right? And one form of saying, hey, it's not, you're a white person, you're not allowed to talk about that. That's one form of skirting the argument, using emotional outrage. Oh, you're not black. You're not supposed to be talking about that, right? And this is why they react so violently against black people that happen to be conservative, because, yo, you agree with this man? And they can't use their typical talking point of, oh, you're white, you can't talk about this, right? Now, and then they'll use a different tool. They'll call me names. They'll label me a traitor. But unfortunately for them, I don't get emotionally reactive over the opinions of strangers, right? And that's a big problem for them. Like, a black man that's not cared about being called Uncle Tom coon? What? Yeah. Call me names. You can call me names all you want, but address my argument, though. Make sure you address my argument, right? And it's a shock for a lot of people. Oh, I can't emotionally manipulate this guy into backing down from the argument, because I actually have something to say. When you lower standards, you make black people's position worse, not better. You make them feel better, but objectively, you're setting them up for a bigger failure, because there's no sense of achievement for failing in the Ivy Leagues, right? No one's going to give you a medal for dropping out of Harvard. You're just going to be known as a college dropout. That's it. Oh, I dropped out of Harvard. Why? You ain't Mark Zuckerberg. The only reason Mark Zuckerberg, it looks cool when Mark Zuckerberg say he's a college dropout, because he built a billion-dollar company. What did you build after you dropped out of Yale? Oh, I'm working flipping burgers at Burger King. Oh, because results matter. It don't matter what narrative you spin. It don't matter what excuses you give yourself. No matter what alibis people give. And this goes for anybody, not just Black America. This goes for anybody. It's your fault. 50% of the time you had influence and you had some say on how the outcome turned out. Extreme ownership. That's my message for the Black community and for America as a whole. You are 50% responsible. Like, imagine you met a girl, right? And she told you, oh yeah, I dated 10 guys. All of them were I ended all the relationship because they were all abusive, they were toxic, they were this and that. You're gonna start asking questions like, damn, 10 guys? What are the odds that all 10 of them are bad? Doesn't that sound suspicious to you? Damn, you can't stay in a relationship. You 10 guys, really? You didn't do anything wrong in the relationship? Nope. How believable is that? That's how the black community walk around and expecting other groups of people to take it. Oh, nothing's ever our fault. We're perfect. The only reason we're not successful, the only reason perfect people are not successful is because there's a system out to get them and prevent them from being successful. That's the argument a lot of black Americans are making. When we all know human nature, we're all fallible. We all lie before, we all failed, we all come short. We all know we're imperfect beings. So when someone's coming trying to present themselves as perfect, you already know, oh yeah, that's a lie. Oh, that's not true. Oh yeah, you did something. It can't be 100% someone else's fault. You played a part into those negative outcomes happening to you. And that's what it seems the black community seems to not want to understand. That they play some part into why they get negative outcomes. And I showed it. Statistically, black people are less likely to do homework compared to Asian people. And they wonder why Asians do so well in academics to the point where now affirmative action is discriminating against Asians. Minority on minority crime. But instead of resolving it and say, damn, how did this minority group become so successful in this country? Let's mimic their actions, their behaviors. No, that's why I have such a hard time when people try to conflate race with culture, because culture is something anyone can adopt. If you have a good culture, it doesn't matter my skin color. If I adopt that culture, I'm gonna get the same result. If I adopt the culture of teaching my kid math at 2 years old, I expect when he turns 6, he's going to be really good at math because he has 4 years, a 4-year head start compared to the average black person. And what alibi you have for that one? My son came from a black father. Oh, Kenny's son, he's competing at the same academic level as Asians. How did that happen? You ain't going to ask me for what I do. You're just going to say, oh, Kenny comes from a middle-class background. That's how he was able to set his son up for success. When this is something that anybody can do, regardless of income. All you have to do is choose to invest in your child. As much as black people invest in their child for when it comes to sports, right? When it comes to sports, you see how involved the black parents are when it comes to sports. All I'm asking is have that same type of how you say it, encouragement for academics as well. Did you read today, Tyrone? Marcus, what you doing? Did you study for your math test? All I'm asking is, bring the same energy you bring to sports to academics, and you're gonna see a difference. Personal responsibility. That's something you don't have to vote Democrat, you don't have to vote Republican, you don't have to get into any politics to do that. All you have to do is decide. I'm gonna decide to do something different than the norm. And it may not happen now, but if that culture continues to the next generation and that next generation brings it, hey, black kids learn how to read at 2 years old. Imagine if black culture started a tradition like that. The outcomes for the black community academically will improve over time. But that's too slow for some people. This is why they want to chase political power. They want to force change. I want to remove standards. I want the outcomes now. But you don't have the traits to actually create those outcomes. You're only going to create more failure because you couldn't meet the bar before. What makes you think you're going to meet the bar now? All because they removed the standards. They hire you, but you still won't be able to do the job. Instead of a test preventing you from getting hired, you're going to get the job and then get fired. And that's going to be on your resume. I'm gonna end this with this thought experiment because I got 2 minutes left before I had to close the stream. I'm gonna close it off with this thought experiment. There's 2 kids, right? You don't need to know their race. You don't need to know. You got blue kid and you got gray kid. Blue kid, when blue kid makes a mistake, he's criticized. He's told, hey, you did it wrong, whatever. Gray kid is never told he does nothing wrong. He's perfect. Even though he makes the same mistakes as blue kid, gray kid, silver kid, whatever you want to call this kid here, he's never corrected, right? And these two go into adulthood. Who's going to be more successful? The blue kid that's been critiqued on every mistake he has done and been challenged to improve them, or gray kid who's never been told anything negative in his life? Who's more likely to be successful? The blue kid, obviously, because it's a form of love to tell somebody the reality. Like I said when I started off this stream, right? When I started off this stream, I made a quote. When you want to help people, you tell them the truth. When you want to help yourself, you tell them what they want to hear. No kid want to hear that they made a mistake. But if you tell them the truth, you give them the reality. You give them an opportunity to improve. But when you never tell this guy the truth, he goes around making mistakes, thinking his ish don't stink. Life is going to humble him. Because at the end of the day, life don't pick favorites. The reality is going to be the reality. Damn, I made it into law school. He made it into law school. We removed the bar exam. But he's a better lawyer than I am. What happened? Well, the standardized test would have exposed you and showed you that you weren't ready for the job. He was. This is the argument for standardized testing. And the way to improve the black community situation is not to remove standards. It's to actually support black community, give them the tools, give them the resources to, hey, here's an incentive. Hey, introduce learning. Help them before they get to college, before they get to high school. The problem was started way at home. And the early people intervene in the household to improve the educational academic skills of the black kids, the easier the jump will be when they jump from level to level. My argument is that we have to intervene sooner, not later. Not college. We're going to do affirmative action for college, jobs, whatever. By then, it's too late. You got to get them in elementary school. And it's not by, we need to put more money in elementary school. And it's none of that, because the quality of education still goes down, even though the budget for education has been we spend more money in education, but the results are still declining. So obviously it's not a money issue. It's a process issue. It's our expectation and standards that we place on the kid. Instead of helping families support themselves by, hey, here's a tutor. School choice is another example. Charter schools, I think the main difference why charter schools perform better than public schools is that charter schools have a standard. Hey, you need a 3.5 GPA to remain in the school. There's an expectation. You have to live up to the expectation. Imagine you go into a job, they don't expect you to do anything. How are you going to treat that job? How are you going to perform in that job? You're not going to perform in that job as well as you would if you was in a job where they had a bar and they say, hey, if you don't meet this bar, you're fired. Standards. Have people rise to the standards. Have an expectation. And I think this is what is going on with the black community for too long. We allowed the liberals to have these low expectations for black people, and it enabled the black people to be comfortable doing bad choices. And that's the truth. That's the cause of the black fader in America. I appreciate you guys watching to the end of the stream. I know it's been a long stream. It's been one of my longer streams. I was supposed to end this 30 minutes ago, but I got really into it and I really wanted to finish it. I appreciate all the super chats from Jonathan Fields, Chance Green is Dead, and Seco. I appreciate the super chats. I appreciate the support. I hope you guys have a good weekend. I hope you guys stay safe. I'll catch you guys on the live stream next week. I really do appreciate you guys for coming out. Don't forget to like the stream on your way out, and I'll see you guys on the next video. Peace.